of Keep the High Balls Low. As always, I'll be your host, Lewis Barr. This week we've managed to keep the standard high with our guests. Today I'm joined with ex-Inverness, Hearts, Partick, Brechin and Meadowbank Thistle player Donald Park, and also legendary coach. Donald, first of all, thanks very much for coming on my podcast.
That's not a problem. Hopefully it's worthwhile, as I said earlier.
I'm sure it will be. The reaction's been great, Parky, so I think it'll be good. We'll just go right back to the start, if that's okay, Parky. You grew up in a village called Quail, just up at Fort William.
It's actually cool. It's called. It's C-A-O-L. It's Gaelic. It's a Gaelic word, but it's cool. Is just outside Fort William. Yeah.
So what was like?
Okay. Yeah.
What was life like growing up for you, Parky? And when did you first fall in love with football?
Well, you see, at that time, we're talking long time ago. We're talking the 50s and the early 60s, probably. There wasn't much more to do than apart from kick a ball round about at that time. There wasn't a lot of traffic on the roads, which was actually a plus because we got to play in the street. And I used to run for the papers every morning, and I used to take a football with me and just run with the ball to collect the paper and then come back and go home and then go to school. So probably that's how it started, just with, and there was, where we stayed, there was a little park just outside our house, and just the local kids, we used to just play football there, and that's where it started.
Brilliant. Your village seemed to produce quite a good few players, Parky, guys like Duncan Shearer, John McGinley and George Campbell. Why do you think your village produced these kind of players?
Well, we all played around about the same time. Duncan's actually my second cousin, so it's all that relatives up there. And John came from down south when they built the pulp mill around about that time. I think John came around about that time. But George, I'm still very close to George. George is in Australia, and I speak to him at least once every couple of weeks. We were fortunate at that time. It's actually amazing where maybe players, they push everyone else on, at that time. And maybe that's why you get a glut of players coming through at the same time, because they drive each other on. And football was, I get quite depressed when I actually look at Fort William now, Fort William Football Club, and actually see how poor they are and where they are in Highland League standings. But at that time, when I was a kid, there was no Fort William Football Club. It was just local football, and I had to go to Inverness to play Highland League when I started.
So how did that move come about, Parky? Were you scouted back then?
I'm not sure. We used to play in school. And we used to travel most Saturdays away, because Inverness, the closest place to Inverness that would play school football would be Inverness, which is 65 miles away, and all the other schools are beyond that. So like a place like Elgin was 100 miles away, and at that time it's quite a distance. So we used to play most of our games away from home. And I don't know exactly how I got scouted, but it was through a culmination of people from Fort William and someone from Inverness that got me a trial for Inverness Cali at that time. And I played my last year in school, my last 18 months in school, for Cali before coming to Hearts. And I had a trial organised at Hearts during that period.
So when you end up moving to Hearts, Parky, did you stay by yourself or did you stay with other guys in the team?
No. I was fortunate. My sister lived in Edinburgh at that point, so I went and stayed with my sister. So there was someone. I actually I came to Hearts and went to university at the same time, which will become a major surprise for a lot of people. And but I didn't last very long at uni, because I got into the Hearts first team after about, I can't remember, it was October or November, and I packed uni in just after that, just to go full time.
So what was life like as a young apprentice, Parky? Were you on the jobs back then, or were you cleaning?
No, well, you see, I probably signed. I was probably 17, just 18, so I wasn't an apprentice at that point. I signed a straight pro. Well, I initially signed an amateur contract at Hearts, and then I signed a pro contract. So I was fortunate. I didn't have all the the jobs and that to do at that time, because I know the kids were abused in the sense of all the work they had to do with that aspect of it.
Do you remember your debut, Parky?
My debut was against Arbroath. I actually played. It was actually quite funny because I know Big Gordon Marshall very well, but it was his father who played in goal that day. It was Gordon's father who played in goal that day, and I had a reasonable success because we won 3-0, and I managed to sclaff one into the corner to give me a goal on my debut.
So, how were the older guys in the team with you? Were they quite hard on you, Parky, in terms of training every day and setting high standards?
No, they were great. I can't have any complaints because I know that sometimes it can be hard. And I remember one time when I was playing, we were playing a sort of practice game, and I was playing against Ian Snedden, and I sort of gave him a little elbow, and he came and he just booted me. Just booted me. And I thought, well, welcome, I'll not do that again. So no, the guys were great. I've got a lot of people to thank, and made it easy for me for that transition at that time.
So Bobby Seath was a manager around that time. Was he quite an old school manager, Parky?
No, anything but. Bobby was probably one of the first, when they were actually talking about, coaching courses and things like that. Bobby was very much pro coaching within that aspect of it. So I was quite lucky because Bobby was certainly one of the guys that did some stuff up down at Largs, and Largs even at that time when it was just starting. So Bobby wasn't quite old school on that side.
Who were some of the top players in that team around time, Parky?
Probably Donald Ford was probably the biggest one because he was an internationalist. Wee Fordy. He was probably the biggest one. Guys like Tommy Murray, Big Alan Anderson, Ian Snedden, Eric Crothers was another one I played with at that time. So there were decent players. I was very lucky.
A couple highlights around that time. You play in a couple European games, Parky, and also reached the Scottish Cup final that ended in defeat to Rangers. What are your memories of the games?
The European games were great because I got to play. With the fantastic result in against Leipzig when we played in Leipzig, and we won 5-1 over there to qualify for the next time. And then we played Hamburg, which was a different kettle of fish. Although I managed to score in Hamburg, which was actually a real plus. We got beat 4-2, but we got hammered at home 4-1. And the cup final, I was only a sub in the cup final, but I was delighted to get on. Although it's probably the first cup final ever that the winning team scored a goal before 3 o'clock because the game kicked off early and Rangers scored in the very first minute, just before 3. So we lost 3-1 and Rangers deservedly won.
Who were some of the good players in that Rangers team, Parky? Do you remember who stood out for you?
Oh gosh, now you're asking. Who were the great players at that time? Tommy McLean must have played, I'm sure. Tommy, I was always an admirer of Tommy because we played similar positions. Derek Johnson, because it was Derek Johnson scored because he scored the first goal. I'm sure he scored the first goal. So Derek played. Dave Parlin, I think. My memory's not the best because I'm getting that bit older.
Oh, that's okay. It was, as you say, it was a while ago as well, Parky. Yeah. So, Willie Ormond eventually comes in. Obviously, to us Hibs fans, always obviously renowned as part of the famous five and a club legend. But did you two not hit it off straight away?
Willie, we got on all right. No, we got on okay. I played for him at the start, and then I remember one day it was I got the shout to go and see the manager, Willie, and Willie says, Partick Thistle have come in for you. And I was like, oh, well, I'm not sure. He says, oh, I want you to go. That was his words. I want you to go. So I went to see Bertie Auld and had a chat with him and decided, well, if Willie doesn't want me, I'm better going right enough. So I went to Partick. So there was no fallouts. There was nothing like that. It was just that Willie had actually said that he wanted John Craig because he was left-sided midfield player, and he got Dennis Mckay as well. And that's what he wanted. He wanted a left-sided midfield player, so I became shall we say, the cost of it.
Yeah. So, fittingly, you play Hearts in your first
Very
game
first game.
for Partick. Was there a lot of anger? Were you looking to prove a point straight away, Parky? How did you feel going into that game?
I've never been so wound up for a game in all my life, if I'm being honest. I probably stumbled on psychology a bit just at that point, where I went for a walk the night before the game, and I started to visualise who I was playing against and what I was going to do and the things I was going to do in the game, or try and do in the game, shall we say. So it doesn't work out that way. But we're very fortunate that Partick won the game. We were leading 3-0, but they go back to 3-2 in the last couple of minutes, and it became a panic. So it was a case of trying to prove it.
So how was Bertie Auld as a manager, Parky?
Bertie was quite different. I learned a lot from Bertie because I thought that was the way he managed. He was very motivational for me. He was very harsh. He was really harsh. He treated everyone really, really harshly. And he used to panic coming in if you were getting beaten, even if you were winning sometimes. If you come in after the game and he would absolutely just slaughter you. Old times. Doesn't happen now. For the best. But that was the way it was at that time. And he was good for me. I've got a lot to thank Bertie for in the sense of giving me confidence. I became much better at Partick than ever I was at Hearts.
I read that he had a favourite running drill of his that was called the coffin. What are your memories of that drill, Parky?
Every Monday we'd get the coffin. It was every Monday we'd get the coffin. And if he was really browned off, because it used to be, there was 8 stations. He used to make it 8 stations round the pitch. So there was the corner flags, halfway line and behind the goals. And you would start there and you would run the first leg and then you'd jog all the way around and then you run 2 till eventually you were running 8. And there were the times occasionally he was that browned off. If anyone cheated and cut a corner, you would start again. So the coffin was legendary for all the wrong reasons.
I hope you never used the coffin in your own coaching, Parky.
Oh, don't you believe it? Don't you learn these things? These things are good sometimes. Let's just go and batter them.
You played with Alan Ruff at that time.
Yeah, Ruffy was Ruffy was the international goalie at that time. He was the international goalie at that time. Ruffy was a top goalie. Ruffy used to be worth at least between 6 and 10 points a season for us at Partick. By keeping things out. He was fantastic.
How was he as a guy, Parky? Did you get on well with
Alan? The guys were great. I've been very lucky. The guys at Partick were great, in the sense of togetherness. Because with Bertie being so harsh, it probably put us together a wee bit, because everything got treated the same. So it became a bit of camaraderie, because of the manager.
And as you said, Parky, you feel that you became a better player and you ended up returning to Hearts. How did that come about?
It was Bertie left Partick and went to Hibs. And Peter Cormack came in. Peter Cormack came into Hibs. And a year of Peter. And my contract was up. And I was unsure whether to sign or not. And we made an agreement that if I signed another year, I could leave at the end of that year, So within that season, the last season I had at Partick, I just put it about that. Look, I'm out of contract. If anyone wants me, I'm available. Shall we see? Unfortunately, Hearts wanted me back, so that's how I ended up back at Hearts.
How was Hearts when you returned? Do you feel that they were a better team and maybe a lot fitter and more professional?
They were. Well, I wouldn't say on the professional aspect because they've always been professional. Within that side, things change. We look on things slightly differently. What is professionalism? We certainly would look on it now that we're much more professional now than we've ever been. But whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, it becomes a debate sometimes. But when I went back to Hearts the second time, I was, 83, so I'd be 30. I was actually had a full-time job because I was only part-time ever at Partick. And I decided I'd come back to Hearts, but I wanted to say part-time because I actually think I'm now 30. how much longer am I going to play? So I had a decent job, so I was only part-time, so I used to train at nights when I did my 2 years at Hearts.
And how do you look back on that last second spell with that?
Great.
So have you got, yeah, good.
Yeah, no, very, very good. Alec McDonald and Sandy Jardine were fantastic. Really good. You know, they blended well together. Doddy was very astute. Sandy was the coaching aspect of it. And good players at that time. We probably looked on at a very old squad and very young squad, because it was young Robbo and Gary Mckay and Dave Bowman at that time were the three young kids, and it was like myself and Jimmy Bowen and Willie Johnson, Sandy Jardine and Doddy. You know, so with kids at 18 and 19 or 16 or 17 and guys at 30, 33, whatever it may be. So it was a good blend, and I enjoyed my time, although it was difficult for me being part-time and then being full-time.
We actually had Gary Mckay on the podcast. How good was he as a young player? And also, you mentioned John Robertson as well.
Yeah, the three of them were great. They were all different. Rob was different class and absolutely great goal scorer, and learned a lot from Jimmy Bowen. Gary was an individual player that would go by people and could score and create things. And Bowman was you'll probably not like them, he's saying this, your dog in the middle of the park that was running about and kick folk.
That's me, Parky.
Yeah, well, there's nothing wrong with that.
No, not at all.
Nothing wrong with that.
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, no, we need more of that. You know, there's not many folk do that anymore, because the game has changed a bit. It's about interceptions and not tackles anymore. It's about interceptions. Yeah. You know, so they were great. They were kids, and the camaraderie of it all, and they did really well. Qualified for Europe, you know, and played. What was it? PSG was one of the games played. You know, which was a lesson. To be fair, they were fantastic.
So you have a short spell at Brecon, and then you finish your playing career at Meadowbank Thistle. How much did you enjoy seeing out your career?
Great. Terry was very astute. Terry Christie, really good manager, very bright and intelligent. Wanted to play the game very simply. Had good players. We used to play for corners because our corners were that good. With Graham Armstrong and Tam Henry taking them both sides, and we used to score a lot of goals from corners. And Terry was great, and I learned a lot. I've been very fortunate, the managers that I've had, because I've taken something from every one of them, you know, and that probably, you know, helps you develop when it comes to the coaching aspect of it. You know, so it was good. I enjoyed Meadowbank. I was there a while. I was there a good spell, and Terry gave me my break into the coaching aspect of it, because he said that they were going to start a reserves team, and would I like to take it, because I'd just broken my leg towards the end of the season, and I thought that was me finished, and but no, I stayed on and did the reserves team, and that got me on the coaching ladder, which was great.
Was the plan always to be a coach, Park? I mean, how early on did you realise that was going to be the plan for you?
Well, it must have been about 80 or 80, in 1980, I walked into, it was Firhill at the time, and I walked in and there was a poster up for the coaching courses at Largs, and I stood there, and wee Bertie passed, and he says, "Are you interested in that, son?" And I went, "Well, I don't know, I would like to go and see." He says, "Well, if you go, we'll pay." So me being the good chuff that I am, and something for nothing, I'm going. So I went to Largs and absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it. It was fantastic. Opened my mind and opened my eyes to loads of things. Met good people. And so I started to do the coaching there. I did my B licence in 81 and then my A licence 82, 83. And then did some various other stuff for the SFA, you know, some coaching stuff, you know, over the next few years. So it was great. No, I was very fortunate. So that's how long ago the coaching badges were.
So you have a brief spell as co-manager at Arbroath, and then you get a move to Hibs as a youth coach.
Yes.
Under Alec Miller. How was that for you, Parky?
That was great. That was probably, you know, within that aspect, that was probably my most, I wouldn't say, I was going to say enjoyable. I loved the job at Hibs. Absolutely loved the job at Hibs because I used to, it's great to be involved at first team, but if you're not the manager, you're not doing all the stuff or not making all the decisions. But if you become the youth coach and you're running the teams, you get to do and you get to learn and you get to meet young players and you get to see what they're like and try and help and look after them. So I've got a lot to thank Alec for and Hibs for giving me that opportunity to start with the young players. And that was, as it turned out to be, I was going to say my forte, but what I felt the most comfortable at.
I read that you had a hand in helping to sign Kenny Miller from Musselburgh. Do you remember that time, Parky?
Yeah, oh no, I remember Kenny. It was that time, there was no, we used to train, twice a week. We used to take kids in for training. And at that time, there was 3 or 4. There was Colin Nish, Kenny Miller, and Mark Burchell that trained at that point, at that time. And I always thought Burchie was going to Celtic, but that's not what he told me, one of the times that he was thinking, because you never asked me. I says, Burchie, I always thought you were going to Celtic. And it was between Nishi and Nishi went to Dunfermline. And I remember going down with Alec Miller to try and sign Kenny down to Musselburgh. And as it happened, I think we got the best one.
You also were able to work with young players such as Rardon, O'Connor, Brown, Thompson, Whittaker, Ian Murray. I mean, the list goes on. Tam McManus. Yeah. As a Hibs fan, it was great eventually getting to watch these guys. But when they were at a really young age, Parky, how great was that to watch them develop?
It was a challenge. It was in every sense, because they're all different characters and good guys, and it was great because that, as I was speaking earlier on about maybe when you get a nucleus of good players to push each other on, and that's exactly what happened. Connor and Riordan really drove each other on. Yeah, well, Gary and Deke, were both challenged, both strikers, but both totally different, and what they pushed each other on. Scotty Brown came in as a great driving force, and which proves the way that he's played and done through his career. And you've got guys like Whittaker and Ian Murray and Kevin Thompson. Again, all different types, different characters. Some are loud, some are quieter. So it became a challenge of trying to know, shall we say, what were the things to do that would actually help them get better. And they drove on, but they drove on themselves most of the time, which was great.
And as you said, Parky, obviously, you do your best to coach these guys, but all these players seem to have quite a natural instinct in their play and almost an edge to their game. Did you encourage them to keep that and not to lose that side?
Oh, very much so. I think you need to play, know what you're good at, try and develop on it, but work hard at it and be professional. Know what you want and how you're going to get there. They become the challenges and the driving forces for you. But they certainly drove each other on, and they were great. They were good.
Alex McLeish comes in and then eventually leaves Parky to go to Rangers, and you take charge for one game and remain unbeaten.
How was your Ibrox, which was great. I played Packerluna scored, which was great. I had left. I've been at Hibs, I think I was at Hibs 3 times, or was it 4 times? I can't even remember. It's that often. I had a revolving door at Easter Road. But I left just after Jim Duffy came in, after Alec left. And then I came back with Alec McLeish. And then when Frank got the job, Frank Susie got the job, he asked me to be his assistant, but unfortunately it didn't work out for Frank, and it was a very short spell. And then Bobby Williamson came in, and I was definitely surplus to the requirements at that point. So left again.
What are your memories? Obviously, Frank Susie to us Hibs fans is, an absolute legend of the club. And I remember that time when he took the job, and I thought the way he was treated, Parky, was quite terrible, to be honest, for such a legend of Hibs. I mean, how did you feel round about that time?
I was actually shocked. I was actually shocked a bit. I don't know if they panicked or whatever, because we hadn't won a game. We hadn't been beaten. And we did well against Rangers and Celtic and things like that. But Frank hadn't won a game, and I thought they were worried about where they were going. So they made that decision, which doesn't become easy. It couldn't have been easy for Rod Petrie at the time, because Frank was the god, shall we say, at that time, and he's the best player I've ever seen close up, and that's even considering the Latapi was there at the same time, who was fantastic, But Frank was, and as a man, was fantastic. So it was a short spell, which was a shame. But shall we say, football's a very harsh game at times, and you just got to try and deal with what's thrown at you, shall we say.
The top player, but did you think that Frank had what it took to be a top manager? And do you think the experience at Hibs maybe put him off being a manager in the future?
I don't think there's any doubt in that. I think the experience at Hibs would have put him off, because he went and did television, after that aspect of it. So I would imagine it would have, because it was sad. It was sad because he was such a great player, but there's not a lot that can be done. That's just the way the game is at times. The difficult decisions need to be made, and I'm sure it wasn't easy for Hibs because he was such a great player. So
we mentioned that you became interim manager for a short while, Parky. Did you ever fancy being a manager at any point, or did you just prefer the coaching side of things?
See, I did a stint at Meadowbank, as an initial stint, and then left that, and then a very, very short spell at Arbroath before joining Hibs to become a youth coach. And I'd made up at the point at that time that I wanted to be a coach. I didn't want to be a manager. I would rather be on the pitch and dealing with players and be able to talk to players. Manager's much more difficult. So I'd made up my mind at that point that I didn't really want to be a manager. So that maybe gave me a plus in the sense of that I was never going to threaten anyone's job if I was going there as a coach, because I didn't want their job. They could keep it.
So eventually, Parky, you get the opportunity to work with John Robertson again, and you join the management team at Inverness. How did that come about?
It was actually because when I left Hibs, I had done a deal, and I said I'll give myself 3 months to see if I get a job in football. If not, I need to go and find a job. I need to do something, apart from just self-preservation. So I started to drive a taxi. This was about the October or November, probably. And I was driving the taxi one night, and Robbo phoned me just before New Year. And he says he'd got the job in Inverness, would they consider coming up? I says, when do you want me up? That was basically it. They played St Mirren the next day. I think it was St Mirren they played. I says, I'll come to the game. And then I went to Inverness, and I was delighted to get back in with Robbo. We had a decent spell up there because we were good players at that point at Inverness.
You managed to gain promotion to the SPL. I mean, it must have been a great memory for you to look back on, Parky.
That was fantastic. But as I said, we're good players at the time, and we judged our run really, really well, because we won the last game of the season against St Johnstone to go up. And then it was the challenge of actually trying to stay in the league, which was going to be a major challenge, because at the start of the Premier League, they had to play the games in Aberdeen because the stadium wasn't suitable for Premier League football at that time. So that was even more of a challenge, So, but after the horrendous start, losing the first game of the Premier League 4-0, I think it was Livy. We got battered. I think it was Livingston. I think it battered us 4-0, and we started to peg away. We won the first game against, I think it was Dunfermline or someone, and then we had some decent results and managed to stay in the league, which was great.
And you end up going back to Hearts as part of the management team with Robbie. Were you excited to go back?
It was good to be back down the road, but I was very unsure how much they wanted me as part of the package. I think it was just there as an extra, if I'm being honest. And then when I got there, I thought, oh my goodness, what have we done? Because it was under Romanov's time, and players coming in and this happening and that happening, and it didn't last very long, to be fair.
Did you have any?
It was an experience.
I can imagine. Did you have any personal meetings with Romanov?
No.
surreal was that time under Romanov, because the way the club was run was so different to any other team that you'd worked at, Parky.
Yes, it was. They just wanted to control everything. So it was only a short period, and I thought Robbo was unfortunately maybe the token gesture about helping the deal go over the line. When Robbo came in, but I think he'd made up his mind at the start that he wanted to change everything and to get his own manager and everything in, and that happened at the end of the season, or towards the end of the season. So we were only there a matter of months, I think it was. Although we actually did okay, because I think we ended up in the league, got to 2 semi-finals, won a great game in Bal. So we'd actually done okay. But again, it changed quite quickly because Robbo left and I left just shortly after him.
And Robbo's obviously he's taken some time off just now, but he's still in management, Parky. Do you think he's got what it takes to be a top manager?
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. Robbo's great. He's absolutely very astute in the game. Really good team talks. Challenges himself with trying to do different things. Very good on the pitch. See things quite like Robbo's very, very good manager.
And you end up going back to Inverness with Charlie Christie. How much did you enjoy working with him?
As I said, I've been very lucky. Charlie was great, because again it came as a little surprise. When Charlie phoned me and asked me if I'd come back up the road. At that point, and I was delighted too, because I've got a lot of good memories from Inverness. A lot of really good time, and I've still got a house in Inverness. I've really a lot of happy memories from the people around the club and the players and things like that. It was great. Inverness was good. And
you have a brief spell at Wraith, and then you end up returning to the Hibs under Big Mckay. How was he to work with?
Mckay was great. Mckay's a real pro in the sense of meticulous in what he wants to do. He's not the angry man that maybe people think he is. He was very thoughtful and things like that. I was delighted because it became a surprise as well. So I must have actually impressed him when I was coaching at Hibs when he was a player, because it came out of the blue that he asked me to go, with him to Hibs. But I was delighted to go back, from that time.
So you spend 18 months at Hibs, and then you get offered a role with the SFA as head of coaching.
Courses, and then help them with the licenses from the early 90s. So I had, and I loved doing the coaching courses. I absolutely loved doing the coaching courses. And the job comes about. Eventually I got a call and applied for the job, and fortunately got it. That was 2009, I think.
So you helped design the SFA Coaching Program. How much of that was your input, Parky? And did you take influences from other people and places?
Yeah, the thing is, when we came to do the coaching, but the aspect on that side was, what does the game look like nowadays, and what's it going to look like in the future? What are the main changes that there's going to be? Because the game evolves all the time. So how can we make our courses that become innovative, that become challenging, for coaches to come and express their opinion? And the one thing that we used to do is to make sure there's no right and wrong way to coach. It's up to you to have your philosophy and do it. But you come and prove your point to us when we do the courses. It was a case of trying to get as much information from other countries about the way they developed and how we could add that to our course, and just keeping things evolving all the time. It was great. I loved it. Absolutely loved it, my time at the SFA.
What kind of philosophies, when you were doing your research and looking at other countries, what countries kind of stood out in the way that they were doing things? Well,
the big followers, you always have the major countries where you speak about the French and the Germans and even the English at that time. So their coaching was a bit more, I wouldn't say bizarre, But you would we were very fortunate by getting to go to all the conferences, so you would actually learn from all the countries, and you say, well, I like that aspect, could we involve that in the course? But the game is the game, but it's how you tweak it, and the slight philosophies and how you play it, that is why some players do well in our countries, and some players that are good players in other countries don't fit in, because the game is slightly different, and we've got different philosophies on it.
I just wanted to ask you about the young players that Scotland produce and have produced for the last number of years. We don't seem to produce as many key wingers and players with more natural ability. Why do you think that is, Parky? Do you think that we're headed in the right direction to recapture that?
No, I don't know on that side. It's great to encourage people to take people on. We try to pass things round about teams all over that way now. And so we try to develop different types of players. Probably our tricky wingers and everything else came from people that were, from street football. No, as I'm saying, tricky wingers and that probably came from maybe street football and things like that, and people taking people on and things like that. But now to try to deal with players to make them good technically, they're receiving the ball well, and they're passing it well, and they're passing it through teams. I would just like players to take people on and beat people, because you need someone to beat someone now to create the space that's going to help you score the goal. So it's about time we got back to maybe a wee bit encouraging people to take people on. But there's that fear aspect if you lose the ball and the team counter attacks against you. Because who is it? Was it Jesse Marsh that was talked for the Celtic job? He was speaking about the 9-second rule. About there's 9 seconds between you losing the ball and the chance of losing a goal. So therefore maybe that's why we're a wee bit scared to take people on in case we lose it. But the best players are still the ones who take people on.
Brilliant. So how do you look back on your coaching and playing career? Obviously, you're still going as well, but how do you look back on what you've achieved so far?
Well, I don't know. I've been very lucky. And, whenever I started to be involved in a game that you loved as a kid, and I remember saying to myself, if I get to play football till I'm 30, I'll have done okay, by playing a game that I actually love. But to be still involved in it for another 30 odd years after that is absolutely fantastic. So I can keep pinching myself and actually saying it's great, because I've never lost my enthusiasm for it. I think I've hopefully tried to evolve with the game within that aspect of it, because attitudes towards the game now are totally different, and attitudes towards players now is totally different towards what was normal when I was brought up, and things like that is not normal anymore. So we need to evolve on that aspect of it. But I've been really lucky to be involved as long as I possibly could. And hopefully another couple of years, maybe.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Parky.
Yeah.
We're just going to finish up. There's a few questions that have been sent in from different people just to finish up. So Duffy from Edinburgh has sent in, who was the youngster you knew was going to make it? You were just absolutely sure of.
Kenny Miller had great drive. Riordan was the one with great ability within that aspect. Because I firmly believe that ability is nothing without desire and attitude. Attitude is, if we go for a list of the credentials you need to become a player, attitude becomes the most important, not ability. If you've got attitude and ability, you can become a player. But if you've got ability and no attitude, it becomes really, really hard. I'm very lucky in the sense of the ones that I've actually worked with. Riordan was always my tip because of his ability. It's a pity with some of the other daft stuff he did, but he was an absolute fantastic player. See, Deeks worked really hard. That's it. People don't give Derek the credit that he actually deserves. But Derek was very thoughtful on the game. I know he was a bit stupid sometimes off it, but he used to. Juninho, was it? That used to play at oh gosh, one of the French clubs. Gosh, I can't even remember. He used to watch, because Dick used to practice kicking the ball so that it would move in the air. He worked his technique in that. He also used to practice about kicking the ball at people's legs, because when they came to challenge you, if when you're shooting, people lift their leg and the ball goes under, and it becomes more difficult to shoot. So he was actually very thoughtful on all the aspects of the game that he had. He had a successful career. He should have played longer. He should definitely have played longer. I'm sure they'll be disappointed in that, but he was a top player and he did well. He was fantastic for Hibs. He did well at Celtic, although wee Gordon kept dropping on that, but he kept coming back and scoring. So he was disappointed. He should have went on longer, and I kept saying, and I see him occasionally, and I keep saying to him, you should have coached. You should have went into coaching, because of his thought process of how he became a better player and how he worked his technique. So I was disappointed in that aspect for him.
Brilliant. Duffy's also asked, what is Parky's opinion on the pro youth system?
The bottom line is that we're getting players out better now than we did before. I don't know. I think it's better because the kids are better. I'm being harsh and saying better looked after. They're probably more professional, probably better, bigger challenges for them, because they're not playing with their pals or the local boys clubs. So some of them are travelling a distance, but that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. I just think we should be better. We should be better because they're getting better looked after. They're getting better information. They're playing on better surfaces. All the things. They're playing with better equipment, and the information they get is great. But the challenge for me is getting these players to get the chance to take the next step, which becomes the hard part. Get to the first team and then playing in the first team. That's the biggest challenge.
Brilliant. Matthew Moyer has asked, who was the best player he worked with throughout his career as a player and as a coach?
Sorry, Riordan was Deep was my pick, and yet, when you look at someone like Stephen Whittaker's with the consummate pro in every sense, and it's been fantastic to achieve what he's achieved. Riordan was the most, as you said, gifted, talented. Gary O'Connell will be that happy about it.
Good player, top player as well.
Yes, absolutely. And what was the other question? The best player?
As a player as well, who was the best player that you played with?
Oh, Morris Johnson. Morris was only a kid. Probably Morris, he was only a kid at Partick Thistle. So there was that aspect, and seeing what he went and did, after it. So on that one.
This one's from a guy I think you've known and worked with, Kevin McGoldrick.
Oh, yes.
He's asked, which coach has stood out to you, but is maybe not the biggest name in football?
Here's one for you, on that side. The coach, if I'm looking on, as a player, I learned a lot from different coaches. Bertie Auld was probably one of the most influential for me, in the sense of giving me that edge to it, but me learning that wasn't the right way to do it. If you see what I'm going on, because people change. Because he was very good in the game on that aspect of it. Ian Cath was a top coach. I know he didn't do that great at Hearts for whatever reason, but as a coach and innovative, Cathro is absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
Brilliant. And the last question is from myself, Parky, just to finish. How would you like to be remembered as a player and as a coach?
I don't know. Hopefully fondly, although I very much doubt it, because probably people remember me as being far too crabbit to on that side. Hopefully I've not scarred too many people, because I always think of the players I've worked with, it's not because of, but it's maybe more in spite of that they've succeeded within that aspect of it. But hopefully that people can remember me with a bit of have a smile. That would be great.
Yeah, I think by you know, some of the messages that I read when I announced that you were coming on, Parky, it seems like you've had an influence on, you know, so many coaches, and people do look on you as such an influential coach, whether they've went into coaching or as a player. You know, so for coming on and speaking on my podcast, I really appreciate it, Parky.
No, thank you very much. No, it's been good. I hope it's worthwhile for you. I hope it really do.
No, I'm sure it will be. Thanks again, Parky, and take care.
You take care. Okay, bye now.
Cheers.